Welcome to the social-engineer.org podcast number 104.
Ooh, triple digits.
That's a nice number.
It is.
Anything in the hundreds.
Yeah, it feels very established.
It does. Yeah, like you see, you missed the beginning 8 years of where we were learning how to not be morons. So
I'm just playing catch up.
You kind of got lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crash course in not being a moron 101.
Or you could not, and you could just skip the first 8 years and just come to the non-moron stage.
Noted.
I like that plan.
I will work on that. Yeah. You do. Don't be a moron.
Yeah. Step 1, don't be a moron.
Step 3, profit.
Step 3, we skip step 2.
Yes.
Hence we're morons. Okay. And quickly moving on. As you can tell, the only two morons here today are Kat and I. So Ping and Dave can't make it. So we're all on our lonesome.
It'll be okay. We'll make it.
It'll be okay.
Our guests will make it. Yeah.
Yes, and that's the thing. Our guest, we have a great one. So his name is Dov Baron. I met Dov through a referral. Another friend, Jordan, referred me over to Dov to have a conversation just about some of the principles that we both teach, even though in completely different fields. So Dov and I hopped on a Skype call. We started chatting about our training and the way that we speak. And quickly I was able to determine, man, we really have a lot in common. So I thought he'd make a great podcast guest. So you may have heard of Dov through his website, Full Monty Leadership. He's written a couple books. His most recent, Fiercely Loyal, How High-Performing Companies Develop and Retain Top Talent. You may have seen him he's got a Roku show called Pursuing Deep Greatness with Dov Baron. He's got a podcast, which is one of the most high-rated podcasts for business and leadership, called Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show. He's been on CNN, CBS, USA Today, Boston Globe, and the list just goes on. I can talk for 10 minutes about his long list, but you may have also seen him in Inc. magazine's top 100 leadership speakers to hire. So I think we're going to have a really interesting conversation for some of the principles from his most recent book and how we can apply them to social engineering. So stay tuned. We're going to get Dov on now. We are back with our guest, Dov Baron. Dov, how you doing?
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show. We're really excited to have you here. We were talking a little bit before you came on about your bio and that the list of places you have spoken and been on and interviewed is quite extensive. Maybe to start off with, you could just tell us, how did you get into this industry? How did you get into leadership as part of a job role?
I fell in. Stumbling and fell. The truth of it is that I've been an entrepreneur since I was a kid, since I was about 16 and 15, 16. I had businesses in the UK, in Australia, and in Canada. And I was in Australia chatting with a guy who I knew was a business guy. And he said, I want you to come speak to my leaders and my managers. And I was like, what do you mean speak? I don't know what you're talking about. He goes, just come talk to them in the boardroom. We're having this annual meeting. And I'm like, I don't even know what to talk about. And he goes, you can talk about anything you want. Anything? Yeah. Okay. How long? He says about an hour. I'm like, oh, no. That's way too long. Anyway, he taught me into half an hour. I should note here, for those of you who are under certain age, at the time I was, I think, early mid-20s. It was 1984. And he said, my one condition is that you show up looking exactly like this. For those of you who don't remember what 1984 looked like, I had hair that was mid-chest level, like Howard Stern's in those days, the Louis the 13th special, earrings that were big enough you could hang parrots off them. And I had been a bodybuilder for about 5 years then. I'm still a bodybuilder, but back then, in my early 20s, it was essential if you were bodybuilding that everybody knew that. So I wore T-shirts that were far too tight.
I have a great mental image right now.
And I was like, well, why do you want me to come like this? You know I wear suits. Now, you see, he owned a national menswear clothing company, and he actually used to make my suits. So when I wasn't dressed like that, in ripped jeans, tight T-shirt, etc., my hair would be slicked back in a ponytail, and I'd wear a beautiful suit. And he says, no, I want you to come like this. Anyway, I agreed to go, and as planned, I arrive at the certain time and I put my head in the door as he's instructed me to do. So all the guys can see me, and his guys, they're all buttoned up tight sitting around their table. And they look out at me with this crazy hair and the big earrings and the muscles, and I can see them giving me what we call in England, the bugger off nod. And I just smiled and stood and waited. And then Steve announced me who I was. He said, please welcome our speaker. And I got up and I spoke. Now, I cannot tell you what I spoke about because I have no memory of what I spoke about, but I can tell you how I opened. And what I said was, again, this is early 80s in Australia. I said, how many of you are racist? Because it was a big issue with the Aboriginal people of Australia. I said, how many of you are racist? And of course, nobody puts their hand up. And I said, how many of you would judge somebody by the way they look, the color of their skin, or what you perceive as their visual? Nobody puts their hand up. And I just looked at them all and said, you're a bunch of freaking liars. Every single one of you judged me by the way that I looked. You decided on my income. You decided on a million different things about me without knowing anything about me. I look over at my buddy Steve, and I figured, I've done myself in, really. It's probably not what he wanted, but he's got a smile massively across his face. I had delivered exactly what he knew I would deliver, and it was exactly what was needed. And that was my birth into speaker. Now, what I'll tell you is that if the story ended there, I would be the hero because I knew how to be authentic and I spoke authentically. But the story doesn't end there. It just takes a pause there because about a week later, he came back in and he said, oh, Alistair wants you to speak for his company, another menswear guy. I said, oh, great. That's fantastic. Now I'm kind of excited about it. So what did I do? I went away and did research on what speakers looked like, and they didn't look like me. They had short hair. They had those nasty cop stash, sort of salesman mustaches. They wore blue suits, white shirts, red ties. They wore the uniform. So what did I do? I cut my hair, wore a blue suit, white shirt, red tie, and went to deliver the next presentation and died a death. It took me about 5 or 6 years to work out the problem. I traded my authenticity for the approval of what I thought I was supposed to be.
I am impressed that despite the not hero ending, you picked up so quickly when you walked in with no other communication other than be who you are, and you fell right into this perfect speech. That's really interesting and impressive.
It's really impressive if I'd have held to it. But I think that this is one of the great lessons of our lives, is that often we stumble into the right thing, and then we go looking for validation in the world. And often, if it's authentic, it doesn't align.
It's almost as if, and we didn't, audience, we did not do this, but it's almost as if you read my mind and then perfectly set up my very first question. and
okay.
Kat can back this up because this is how freaky this is. On page 164 of your book, Fiercely Loyal, you have a section that's entitled The Desire to Belong. And it's something that we speak about a lot in our company, which is what we call the tribe mentality. And that fitting into your tribe is essential in social engineering, but it's essential in life. So when you realized that you were giving up your authenticity to fit into this certain tribe, well, okay, we heard how that affected your business a little bit, but how did you determine to fix it?
Well, as I said, I didn't even know what I had done wrong. All I knew was when I went and did my second presentation, I sucked. I couldn't work out why I'd fallen on my face when I'd been such a big hero and hit in the first time. So this is the thing. I didn't know right away. It took me quite a long time. It took, like I said, 5 or 6 years to really get, this is what it is. I got to be me. And so here's the thing. You're absolutely right, Chris. Human beings are tribal. You and I had to talk about this a while back. We are, by our very nature, tribal. We need and want to belong. And if we don't have a tribe to belong to, we will find a tribe to belong to, or we will create a tribe. Very few people have the courage to be a leader in the true sense, and that is creating their own tribe. And a true tribe comes from your authenticity. It's the people who rally around the truth of who you are. And so that is the key for us. So yes, we're tribal. And when we're in a tribal environment, we feel comfortable, we feel safe. Dopamine accelerates in the brain, oxytocin, which is the bonding hormone, serotonin, endorphins, all those feel-good hormones start releasing in the brain when we're in our tribe. So this is the challenge, is that to be authentic, you actually have to leave your tribe. It's a natural process to feel down, to feel depressed, to feel isolated, to feel like I'm in the wrong place. because you've actually moved outside of the tribe. But the only way to find your tribe is to leave the one that you were bought into or implanted into or forced into.
That kind of leads me to that question, is that although you said that you kind of lost your authenticity, it was essential for you to do that. If you wanted to break into a new tribe and get business in a new tribe, it was essential for you to become part of that tribe.
Well, it was essential for me to become part of the speaking world. But you see, this is what my point here is, that I looked at it through my lenses. So the lenses I was looking at it through were, what does it take to be a speaker leader in that world? And my assessment was wrong in the generalized context. And this is the lesson I want everybody to get. My assessment was right in the generalized context. What does it take? It takes the ability to be able to speak, to be able to stand on a platform. Okay, kind of got that. It takes you to have short hair, a blue suit, white shirt, red tie, and a mustache. Well, I went and got all those things. But that isn't what worked. What worked was for me to show my point of differentiation that would imbue me and really sort of allow the tribe to bond to me. So I was trying to fit into the tribe rather than having the tribe see the value that I could bring. And this is where we often trade our authenticity for approval, and that will never work out in the long term.
So I have a question. You essentially were all, okay, I'm a speaker now. Who are speakers? And you looked at that tribe and you broke it down into, what does this tribe have? And therefore, I'm going to join it more than just doing this role. I'm going to do the hair. I'm going to do the suit. And that didn't work. But now here you are, you're a great speaker. I actually do think you were wearing a blue suit on the cover, but that aside, and I do think your hair is short now. Again, that aside, I think it's interesting because in one of your chapters, you had talked about the need to grow or the need to, or die. Those are your options.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if that is only a individual reflection, or do tribes grow as well, or do tribes choose to die? So the real question is, once you changed your game, once you realized you needed to be this authentic speaker, did you start a new tribe, or were you a leader in changing the speaker tribe? Does that make sense?
Wow, that's a great question, Kat. I'm going to give you a gold star for that one.
Thanks. I love gold stars.
So that is a really fabulous question, because the truth is that I fought against the tides of the tribe. I tried to change the tribe, and the tribe doesn't change unless the tribe collectively wants to do so. So you're absolutely right. Yes, we're either growing or we're dying. And that's not my opinion. That's evolution. You can take a look at anything. That is just what happens. As individuals, we have to decide, are we going to grow or are we going to die? Now, part of dying in this context of what we're talking about here is conforming. So we stifle, we suffocate the very soul of who we are, the essence of who we are. We begin to suffocate that in order to fit in. Again, we choose authenticity over approval. So you have got to decide to grow until you are outside of the tribe. And one of two things will happen. Some of the tribe will follow you and some of the tribe will reject you. But when you push outside of that tribe, you will create a new tribe. So it's not always about expanding the tribe you're in. Sometimes you actually have to break out. You actually have to do something different. So I've never been the kind of speaker that all the other speakers are. I know that there are other speakers who are also broken free from the traditional, but I'm never going to be that kind of speaker. And trying to be it makes me miserable and doesn't actually deliver what it is they want. So when they say, will you do X, Y, Z, or can you be A, B, C? My answer is no, that's not who I am. That's not what I deliver. I deliver LMN. Do you want LMN? Oh, we never even thought about that. Well, let me show you why L and M and N are very important to you in your business, in your growth, in your leadership. And if that appeals to you, fantastic. So my LMN is, where is your purpose? Where is your purpose as an individual? Where is your soul in business. Business is about the evolution of human beings. We are here to make humans better, and we get to use this vehicle of business and leadership. Is that appealing to you? Or are you purely focused on profit? If you're purely focused on profit and you don't see the value of being purpose-driven, I'm probably not the speaker for you. But if you are focused on that, I can show you how to create enormous loyalty in your organization, bond your top talent to you, and bond your clients and customers to you, because they will see you as a point of differentiation that cannot be shown by some brand or some advertising.
So then once you do that, okay, so let's say now you created this new type of speaker. So you didn't conform to the present speaker tribe. And now someone else sees that and they're like, hey, that guy's pretty cool. I like that. So now they start to mirror you the same way that you did when you went out and you looked.
Yep.
And you started to mirror other speakers. Are you now in essence changing the tribe, or are you creating a new one?
I would like to think that I'm creating a new one. I think that I have some influence on the old one, but as Niels Bohr said, for things to change, sometimes you have to wait for the old guys to die. Niels Bohr was a quantum physicist. What that means is that there are people who are going to be embedded in what it is that they do, and I deal with this in my business, that there are leaders who are saying, well, I've made this into $100 million, $500 million company. Who are you to tell me? Because what I do works. And the answer is absolutely, what you do has worked.
Yeah.
But if you continue doing what has worked, then you're going to fall through the cracks very quickly, because the world is changing faster than it ever has. So I think that there are many leadership speakers still around today, and there's an audience for them, but that audience is going away. It's dying off. And with it, speakers are emerging who are very different. It's fascinating for me. I look around, I meet 25, 29, 35-year-old speakers, who to me are so young and so vibrant, and they're killing it. And good for them. They are killing it because they're not showing up in the same old way. They are different. Listen, when I started speaking, it's 34 years ago. I have always sworn, not so much with the F-bombs, but I've always sworn. The F-bombs are part of my life, but not on the stage. Generally speaking, that is. I do it on stage, but only in certain environments. But Gary Vaynerchuk came out and he started dropping F-bombs, and suddenly speakers started to try and be cool and drop F-bombs. That's not authentic. That's you imitating Gary Vaynerchuk. If you don't swear, don't start swearing because you think it's cool. If you do swear, and that's part of who you are, fine, terrific. This is the thing about even the speaking. I train people to speak, and part of the thing we do is called full Monty speaking, is we teach people how to be authentic speakers. So deliver your way. I can give you a framework, but my coaching around it is to elicit from you your natural style, because that is what's actually attractive. Nobody wants everybody to be like everybody else. The thing that you love about your partner or partners is their unique things. It's not how they fit in with everybody else. It's that weird idiosyncrasy that you can joke about on an anniversary that actually you love.
So let's say a speaker uses really large and obscure words. You're saying they should keep doing that?
Don't answer that, Dov. Don't answer that.
Answer it.
I actually am going to answer it, and I'll tell you why I'm going to answer it, because it's actually part of
the right answer.
Yes, please be the right answer.
If you want to use large and obscure words, go right ahead, as long as you're using large and obscure words to an audience who understands the large and obscure words.
Very
I love
diplomatic.
you. You're the best guest.
If you're using those words with anyone else, what you're doing is showing off how smart you are.
Thank
and
you,
nobody
Dov.
gives a shit how
Thank
smart
you, Dov. I'm virtually hugging you right now. Yeah, there you go, Kat. Right from the dove's mouth. Right there.
That means it's true.
It's dog, not there's no way.
Well, my husband had me re-listen to our last podcast, and I was like, okay, those words weren't terrible.
Yeah, so this is something Kat's, it's an inside joke, because I'm always making fun of her, because she's very educated and very intelligent, way more intelligent than me, as you can tell by her questions already. But she tends to use really large words, and then I have to use a thesaurus to figure out what the heck she's saying. And I'm like, no, you can't train this way. People don't understand you, and then they'll feel alienated and stupid like I do all the time.
Yeah, it's very interesting because, I'll give you a great example of it. As you can tell by my accent, I was not born in Canada.
No.
I was educated in the UK and then traveled and lived in many different countries, including Asia, Indonesia, Australia, spent some time in France and Italy, traveled around a lot. But my education came from Britain. And it's fascinating to me how much of my language I cannot use here. There are words that I just don't use here because when I use them, people don't understand them. So if I say that was a hyperbolic statement, oftentimes I can see that people are looking like donuts. They're fully glazed over.
Yeah.
When I use those.
Let me go get my dictionary so I understand what you just said.
If I say, there was a soupçon of something, people are like, what the hell are you talking about? So I know that I also have to have my language fit the environment.
Yeah.
If I'm speaking in the UK to leaders, I can use those kinds of words. But very often in North America, those are not words that are part of the lexicon. Yeah. I have to be considerate of that too.
Yeah.
Best guest ever.
To be fair, I've also been underscoring to Chris, I did teach young children for a while in rural Arkansas. He and I speak so many times a day. So my point is, in this comfort zone that is my life, I would communicate with Chris as I communicate with anyone, which does involve bigger words than I would if I was teaching. But yeah, this is a very deeply ingrained battle at this point.
All you have to remember is that the average reading age is
it's like 5th grade,
12 and 15 years old. And if you're using language that's beyond that, with the general public, then you're already outside of their capacity.
No, not if, when she does.
Oh, stop.
There we are.
I'm going to make you listen to all the podcasts we record again, and we'll just go through and flag me.
So, Dov, there's something actually kind of fitting this conversation that you brought up also in your book. It's just for people who will be reading, and I'm going to reference the pages. On page 146, you talk about this subheading, you have to let them in. So it was another question I had is, we talk about before just this tribe mentality and fitting in with the tribes you want to enter or having the courage to change them. But then here in this section, you're talking about letting people see exactly who you are. And you use the phrase warts and all. What's the reasoning or the psychology behind that? How does that affect people when you allow them in and don't always have to appear so pressed and perfect?
Thank you for asking. So in order to answer this, I'm going to have everyone listening, including you guys, do a little exercise. In your mind, I want you to picture on one side of you someone who is a trusted, loyal friend that you've known for anywhere between 3 and 5 years. Can you picture somebody?
I can.
So this is somebody who's really trusted and loyal, and and you've known them for 3 to 5 years. On the other side of you, I want you to imagine that there's somebody you've known for about the same amount of time, 3 to 5 years, but they're an acquaintance. What's the difference between the two people?
Yeah, the guy on my right, he knows everything about me, and he actually cares about me, and he wants what's best. The guy on my left just knows the external-facing Chris that
right.
I let him know.
Keywords, the last few words you said, that I let him know. So here's the thing. If you want to bond people to you, you have to have vulnerability. If you're my age, if you're over 40, there's a pretty good chance that you grew up, or when I say grew up, I mean in the context of work, you grew up with the idea that vulnerability was weakness. What we know now for sure, and certainly in dealing with anybody who is under the age of 38 years old, 38 or under, is that vulnerability is a strength and it is a power. And if you don't let people in, they will not bond with you. How do you let them in?
Yeah.
Through reciprocal vulnerability. Now, notice what I said. Reciprocal. It has to go both ways, and it has to be discerning. So oftentimes when I bring up vulnerability with a leader who is in their 60s or even 50s or 60s or 70s, they'll go, I am not going to be there sitting there crying with people. Listen, we're talking about vulnerability. We're not talking about emotional vomit. We're talking about sharing, letting somebody in and seeing if they will let you in. However, leaders, and this is why it's the quote you just brought up, Chris, from the book, leaders have to go first. As a leader, it is your responsibility to go first, to let them in first. Let them see you below the title. Let them see the humanity. People will perform far better for you. They will go to the ends of the earth to do what needs to be done if they know your humanity.
I got a two-part question on this because this is fascinating to me. Let me start with the second one. So I actually think I've been doing this without knowing it, but not on a wide scale. Like I train, I have 2 classes that I train, and after my second class, the master's levels, SE class, I tend to bond with the students on such a level that like they will text me throughout the days, sometimes for weeks and months after the class.
Mm-hmm.
When I see them, I have no problem remembering their names, remembering who they are, where they're from. And in that class, there's a lot of what you just said, like pulling back the curtain.
Yep.
And here's all the things I've done as failing. And here's all the things I've done that succeeded.
Mm-hmm.
And we become equals, not trainer student.
Right.
But then the question that comes up with that is in our field, in our industry, we're constantly talking about vulnerability as a negative thing, vulnerability as a way that hackers can now utilize your weaknesses or your likes, your dislikes as a way to attack
Mm-hmm.
you. So how do you blend the desire to do this part, to let people in and to bond with them, but to not make yourself so vulnerable that you can be attacked by nefarious or malicious people? I just used the cat word.
You did. Before you answer, Dov, I have something to just add on because I had this thought about the way Chris trains. He also brings up oxytocin in trainings, and especially how oxytocin is released not necessarily when you trust someone, but when you are trusted by someone. So I feel like that very much goes into his question here of, how do you be vulnerable and how are people trusted by you without becoming not vulnerable in an emotional way, but vulnerable in a security way?
Well, as I said, the key is reciprocity. And it is, as I said, it is discerning, meaning it is measured and equalized. So you can't use my shit against me because I've already revealed it. What are you going to do? You're going to tell the world what I told you? I already beat you to it. Gary Vaynerchuk said something years ago that I thought was really interesting. And this was before all the Facebook crap came out. And he said, listen, your privacy's already gone. So why don't you just face that fact? There's 2 ways to look at that. You can be completely fearful, or you can consider this, that how many of us would be better human beings if we knew there was always a camera looking over our shoulder? And I thought that was a really interesting, I'm not suggesting that that's the way to go, but I think it's an interesting way to look at it, is if I'm aware that I at any moment can be exposed, then I need to be responsible, I need to be accountable for how I'm being in the world. And I also need to know that I don't want to be doing or saying things that I don't want to be thrown up in my face. Here's the question. I would put this to you and any of you is I'm not talking about being vulnerable about revealing the passwords to private things. Of course not. That's totally different. What I'm talking about is this, is if back in the day, Barbara Walters, I don't know who that would be today, but Barbara Walters was famous for interviewing people and making them cry because she would bring up stuff that nobody knew about them. So I don't know who the interviewer is today that would do that. But if Barbara Walters or her counter was to interview you, what could that person bring up that would embarrass you? Because if it would embarrass you, get out in front of it and own it. So if Barbara Walters interviews me or her counter interviews me and says, "Oh, Dov, you're a leadership guy, right?" Yes. You influence leaders. Yes. You talk about being authentic. Yes. But wasn't your second speaking gig totally inauthentic? Absolutely, Barbara, it was. Here's what I did. I will reveal that.
Yeah.
You talk about a lot about the mental, emotional, and even physical health of leaders. And you've been into fitness and health for 40 years, blah, blah, blah. Your nutrition and psychological health. You talk about all those things. Is that true? Yes, I do. But we have here that you did cocaine in the 1980s. Is that true? Yes, it is, Barbara. That's absolutely true. I'm going to own it so is that a very good example for you to leaders? No, it's a shitty example, but I didn't do it as an example. I did it because I was in my 20s and it was fun. So it's like get out in front of it is what I'm trying to say. You either get out in front of something or you live in fear of it. And then you get these scandalous revelations about leaders. Nobody can take you down if you already own it.
So I think this is a really interesting parallel. This past weekend, I had a big reunion with some girlfriends from college and all of their husbands, and they were very interested in my job, especially many of them are doctors. And so when you go through things like match day, like getting matched to a residency or getting placed in a hospital, there's a lot of scrutiny on your social media, on your online presence, on who you were. So we call that open source intelligence or OSINT. And so they asked me, and I've actually like delved into a couple of them before when they wanted to make sure that things were cleansed. You know, they've asked me like, what do you recommend you do? Like, how do you hide all your things? And I have not had a super succinct response. Oh, I have not had a super short response. And
I can hear Chris giggling in the background.
Right?
Yeah. I'm just like, oh man.
Hey, I defined it. I backed up. I got it. And Chris and I have had this conversation too, because there is information out there on me. And I am now relatively certain that people in the security community have probably done OSINT on me. But I've been trying to explain to my friends, it's not that you can't have things out there. It's that you have to be really honest with yourself about what exists. And even my mom said something about like, oh, well, that one thing exists, but it was a while ago, so it's fine. And I was like, no. You can't tell yourself it's fine. That's where the vulnerability comes through. You have to assume if it was out there, it's always out there. And that's the fine line. But it is very hard to be like, yes, practice good OPSEC. But yes, also you can probably find thousands of my wedding photos on the internet somewhere. Like, so I think that that's a really great explanation for a problem I was just having that's kind of industry niche.
Kat, taking a quick break from the show. Let's see what we have going on in the world of social engineer.
Super exciting things.
Yeah, I feel like it's always cruel to do this, but I do it anyway. So we have that beautiful OSINT class being taught by Nick Furneaux from CSI Tech in Scranton, but it's completely sold out and full. I did take the last few seats for my team, so I'm sorry, world, but that is just the way it went.
Selfishly, I'm very stoked.
Selfishly stoked, yes. But there are seats left in the 21 through 25 of May Advanced Practical SE course. That's the APSE course in Bristol. We have some seats left there, so you can sign up for that. The price will be going up shortly, so you may want to get in there before that occurs. And we're about, I think, over half full on the Advanced Practical SE class in Vegas at Black Hat. That's a 4-day version of the class. And we have 2 OSINT classes also at Black Hat that Ryan will be teaching. And one of them is about a quarter full, and the other is about half full, I think, something. I have to check the website. But anyway, there's some seats still available in all of those courses at Black Hat if you're interested in checking that out. What else do we have going on? Well, DEF CON is right around the corner. I know I say that it's April, it's right around the corner, but it really is right around the corner.
It literally feels like it's tomorrow.
It is. The videos have been pouring in for the SECTF contestants, and I must say that many of them are scary. But not nearly as scary as Rachel's. It's pretty fear-inspiring, nightmare-ridden. Go upstairs, the lights on. Don't be in the dark. Kind of scary.
I mean, she's definitely following through.
Yeah, she set a standard, and I don't know if anyone else can hit it. It's scary stuff.
A league of her own.
So we have Rachel's video plus a bunch of others. The CFP for the speaker slots, I think, is still open just for another couple days, and then we'll be closing that. So you can look for some announcements on the .org for the upcoming village in DEF CON. Now, keep in mind that shortly after, sometime in the next month, we'll be announcing the SE Village at DerbyCon. So if you're interested in being part of the SECTF there, make sure you hop in and sign up for that. I can't think of anything else. Is there any other announcements we need to make, Kat?
The SECTFs for kids and teens are open for registration. Is that true?
How did I possibly forget that? SECTF for kids and SECTF for teens at DEF CON 26 are now open. And we need the kids and the teens to sign up for that so we know how much stuff to bring. So if you're bringing your kids over, get over to the site, sign up, and let us know that you're going to be joining in for one of those days for the kids or teens events.
Yes.
I think that's about it. Putting the finishing touches on my 4th book. So that should hopefully be out before DEF CON also.
It's going to be exciting season.
Okay. Exciting season. Busy, busy, busy. Okay. Well, we'll get back to the show. You say it way more eloquently, but when I wrote my first book, in my dedication, I didn't even use my kids' names. I didn't use what genders they were, how many. I just said, this is dedicated to my children and my wife. And that was it. And I was like, dead set, I'm never going to tell them who they are in the community. I'm not going to let them be vulnerable. And then in my second book, it was all about nonverbal body language. And my daughter has a natural ability with certain facial expressions and emotional content. And the doctor I was writing with, Dr. Ekman, he suggested I put her in the book. Mm-hmm. So, now I put my daughter in the book, and I had to give her credits, of course, and have her name out there. And for me, it was sitting down and realizing that this piece of quote unquote private information was now going to be made public. And because of that, it meant that was no longer privileged information. So if you come to me and say, hey, how's Amaya? That's not privileged information. It doesn't mean you and I are friends. It doesn't mean you and I have been buddies in the past and I just forgot who you are. It just means maybe you read my book and you know who she is.
Right. Again, back to being discerning about the information. So if somebody says, how's Amaya? The first thing I'm doing, because, relationship and communication is a key part of the work that I do, is I would go, oh, she's great. Why'd you ask?
Yeah.
Immediately, I want to know what the context is. So I give a generalized answer. Oh, she's great. Why'd you ask? Now, that there then tells me where my discernment needs to lie in my response.
Right.
Because that person says, well, I read about in the book and that she has this really cool thing and she can do. Yeah, that she does. And all I'm going to reiterate is what was in the book.
Yeah.
I'm not going to reveal anything else.
That's a great way of putting the expectation back on them.
Absolutely. So this is the other thing, Chris. Just because you've revealed, you still have the authority about how far that revealing goes. Here's an example I gave, and I just love this. I talk about vulnerability and the power of vulnerability and the importance of vulnerability for bonding people to you. And I say, Tim Cook was a great example because here he is, the CEO of Apple, big cheese. I mean, big guy, and comes out and says, yeah, I'm gay, right? And for a lot of big business people, that was pretty brave and courageous of him. But what I always say is Cook didn't come out and tell you the antics he does in the bedroom. He didn't tell you the details. And if you asked him, he would probably say it's none of your business. Because this is the key. You still get to manage. You still get to have discernment about where it goes. Now, if his best friend asks him, he'll probably tell them. So you get to measure it yourself based on the reciprocity of vulnerability on the other side as well. It's not one-sided.
So is that admission from Tim Cook a good example of how to be vulnerable as a leader?
Absolutely.
I guess my question is, now if Amaya is in the book, the world potentially could know that portion of Chris's life. So if he uses that to endear his staff, that's not necessarily you being trusted by Chris. Does that make sense? So where is that line between a personal detail that's very publicly known and being vulnerable with your company and your employees?
So I have what I call circles of intimacy. And the circle of intimacy are the people I work with and are part of my team, obviously far more intimate with me than the general public. But the people who work with me and are in my team are not as intimate with me as my wife, as my kids, or my best friends. There's circles of intimacy. And so you deliver within the context of the circle of intimacy. And this is one of the things that most people don't understand is most people don't have healthy boundaries around their intimacy. So it's kind of like a free-for-all. I'm not going to let anybody in on anything, or I'm going to let everybody know everything.
Yeah.
That's ludicrous. You have to have healthy boundaries, psychological healthy boundaries. And part of that is for you to get smart enough. It's not on the other person. It's for us to get smart enough and go, hold on, where does this person fit in my circle of intimacy? So does it bond Chris to share with his team what was in the book? Yes, if it's a new employee. But if it's an older employee who's been there for a while, probably not, because it's kind of like, it's taken for granted.
Yeah, I've already seen it.
But it needs reciprocity.
Okay, so now this brings up the next part of it, right? Because if you start to become vulnerable, and I like that example you gave, like someone comes up and they ask about Amaya, and now I throw it back on them. Oh, why do you ask? And if their answer is not the book, if their answer is, oh, well, I met her last year at DEF CON and we had a great conversation and blah, blah, blah. Now, maybe there's a little more that can be given than just about the book, since that would be their basis for knowledge of her.
Absolutely. However, I'm still putting it back to that person. So you met her at DEF CON. That's cool. And you had a great conversation. Wonderful. What did you guys talk about? That's really interesting. So I find my kid to be a really interesting kid, and I would love to hear from an outside source.
Yeah.
So I just put it right back.
It's clever. I like it.
I mean, it's communication skills that so few people have because they don't have healthy boundaries. So in a lot of our communication work that we have to do with leadership teams is actually educating them on how to communicate with healthy boundaries. To be totally open and totally vulnerable does not mean all in, as in there are no boundaries. It means there's always going to be boundaries, but you have to have the emotional intelligence, the self-knowledge to know where those boundaries are.
Okay, so that leads to another question. How do you get that?
How do you get what?
The emotional intelligence to actually know your limits.
Well, first of all, emotional intelligence, I love emotional intelligence work, but I think that a lot of it is vastly misunderstood because people think it's something you go learn and then you do to your people. It's not that at all. The root of emotional intelligence is self-knowledge. So when I ask somebody, how's your emotional intelligence? Oh, it's pretty good. How's your self-knowledge? Oh, I'm great. I know who I am. No, that's not self-knowledge. That's actually rigidity. That's not self-knowledge. Part of emotional intelligence is the commitment to growth and development. So self-knowledge is, here's where my strengths are. Here's where I'm weak, or here's what I'm doing that's dysfunctional or unhealthy or pushes people away, or whatever it is you find out about yourself that you need to deal with. Or for me, it's part of the work is, we call it the one red thread, which is to find the purpose of your life, and it's always there. So people go looking for their passion, and they think that that's their purpose. No, your passion will move. It will transcend it. It always is a transitory process. The things I was passionate about at 15 are not the things I'm passionate about now. But your purpose is this one red thread that runs through the tapestry of your life. So in knowing that, when I commit to finding my purpose, by virtue of that journey, I am now engaged in a journey of self-knowledge. I'm now engaged in a journey of self-discovery. And from that self-discovery, I can then move into a process of self-development, which will give me the emotional intelligence. You're not going to become emotionally intelligent by reading Daniel Goleman's book. It's a great book. Don't get me wrong. It's a fabulous book, but that's not going to make you emotionally intelligent. What's going to make you emotionally intelligent is looking in the mirror. The work that I do is very often holding up a mirror to people, having them see what they can't normally see. Because listen, I want each of you to right now try and describe what's underneath your nose without looking in a mirror. You can't really do it. It's obvious to me if I'm looking at you, but it won't be obvious to you. And I am that mirror. I let people see what they can't really see in themselves. That's part of my acute skill set, is I can see what people cannot see. I can see what they cannot see in themselves and what other people often miss. That's my skill set.
So I do have a question on purpose. That's since you just mentioned it from your book, I think that in the information security industry, from the perspective of someone who is passionate about it and works in it, purpose can be very easily defined. We want to teach and help you keep your information and your company's information safe. And in a naive way, it feels like that should be something everybody rallies behind, especially in this day and age when there are breaches happening all the time and people are concerned about Equifax. But I know, and I'm very fortunate to work, and this is a shameless plug, I'm very fortunate to work for a team and in an environment where we do have a purpose, and it does feel there's no blockade. We are a security only company. There's no higher management being like, here's a bigger priority for our company's purpose and our company's direction. But I know that that's not the case for everybody who works in this industry. People who run security departments in large organizations are often fighting, just essentially mines being thrown in front of them. So they have this purpose for keeping their company safe, for keeping their information protected. And 1,000 people are just throwing stuff at them as they're running down this field. what is your advice for keeping purpose and managing your relationships with your team and keeping them engaged and loyal when, the rest of the company may feel like they're pushing against you?
That's a great question. And I would like to clarify because what I want to ask you is what you just said, the purpose, or is that what you want to do or what you do?
Oh, interesting. So I guess I'm kind of speaking on behalf of others, friends I've heard who work in large environments. I work on Chris Hadnagy's team, and I guess, it can be hard with our clients. Sometimes we want to be like, yeah, this is great, but even they have so many other things they have to deal with. I believe I've heard on these internal teams that their purpose is to keep the information secure.
See, I would argue right away that that's not a purpose. Now, let me be clear. Not a purpose in the context of how we hold purpose. Is it a mission? Certainly. Is it a driving force? Absolutely. Is it part of our mandate? It damn well better be if that's your career, but that's not a purpose. So purpose is just, and I want to help everybody to grasp it in the context of what I'm delivering here. Can we do a little exercise? Are you guys okay with that?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so let me ask you can both answer this. Outside of business, outside of what you do for a job, what bothers you? What bothers you in the world? What irritates the out of you? What is it that you see, you go, why the hell hasn't somebody fixed that yet?
Wait for it. I'm sure, I feel like.
There is silence.
Yeah, stand by.
I don't know if we have a long enough podcast to discuss the answer to that question.
And I'm sure there's a very long form that we could take out of it, but it will boil down to something. So for some people, it's that people are still dying with malaria. For other people, it's bad drivers. What I'm saying is it's something that it's not necessarily just contemporary, because I've asked this question and somebody say, well, the president. No, then it would be all presidents. Yeah. Looking at something that's, it's long lasting. What has bugged the crap out of you for as long as you can remember?
So for me, from a deep perspective, it is the fact that children suffer because of adults' decisions. They have no choice in much of their existence and much of where they are. And then adults can come in and really mess with their existence and their status quo, and that's not fair. So whether that be the achievement gap in education or child trafficking, which it's just children get hosed all the time, and that deeply bothers me. And then on a less deep level, it's probably when people say they're trying to make a plan and they're like, we're going to do this thing. Does this time work? And you're like, yeah, okay, where are we meeting? And then they fall off the grid and they don't talk to you for 2 weeks. Then they try it again. Those are the two.
Yeah. So on one level is a lack of integrity, which is the last one. And the other one, the childhood thing, I want you to just hold that in your mind for a moment, Kat. We'll come back to it. Because that was wonderful, by the way. So thank you. Really appreciate your vulnerability with that, because that's how you're actually going to find your purpose. You want to jump in, Chris?
Well, it's going to seem like to mirror that, but I think, like as you and I spoke before, Dov, with my work with the ILF, I would say that's probably the thing that bothers me the most is how children are abused by adults, and it would mirror something very close to cats. They have no choice in the matter. They're often abused by people who they trust the most and who should be protecting them.
Oh, you guys are beautiful. You guys are beautiful. What were the last few words you just said, Chris? Do you remember?
They're abused by people who they should be able to trust.
Right. They are abused by people they should be able to trust. What business are you in?
Yeah, well, understanding how people communicate and then looking for the vulnerabilities in that, right? And how they make decisions.
You're in the business of making sure that you're trusting the right people. So what you are doing, see, this is the thing about purpose. Purpose is emotional. It's not logical or rational. You've made it logical and rational and you've formed it into a business, and that's great. But the cause of it, at the root of it, is pain. Why people most often miss finding their purpose is because they go looking for it in their passion. But your passion does not give you your purpose. Passion is transitory. Purpose, on the other hand, has its roots in pain. It's where, I can't bear this. So how do I fix this? And so it becomes manifest often in a different form, but it's the same root. So this root of people taking advantage of others, people who should be able to be trusted and then being are taking advantage of. That is the business you're in.
I suddenly feel like Dov just like explained my entire life. I'm having a
I have to go with that one too.
Big epiphany over here.
Yeah, that's great. Because then you know, okay, this is actually my purpose. And it has a manifest form that is your company. But that's the purpose. It's not this crap around protecting IP and who's jamming into your signals or whatever it might be. All that stuff is important, but that's just manifestations of it. What's the emotional driving force is what you just said, that you both said. That's why I said you guys are beautiful, because you're actually in the right career, which then gives you a vehicle and gives you a platform and gives you a springboard for doing this deeper work that Kat so very well encapsulated.
Man, like, mind blown.
Yeah, I got nothing.
Yeah, all right. Well,
Game over. Game over.
Most productive.
Well, it was nice having the show.
Call me back when you find the super glue and you glued your brain back together.
Good talk.
Good talk. I'm going to go sit in the corner now and think about money.
Sit in the corner,
sucking my thumb.
Exactly.
Questioning everything.
You know what always amazes me is when we have great conversations with guests like you is, here we're at 50 some minutes and it seems like we just started. It's always fascinating to me. I mean, I knew it was going to be great. I just didn't know it was going to be this enlightening, on a personal level, not just for the podcast. This has been truly fascinating.
And I really hope that the listeners follow the same exercise, because it's very powerful. It's just one piece of what we do in the work that we do, because you can't have a company that's on purpose if you don't really know what the purpose is. If it's something you manufactured because you're supposed to do it. And you can't have that unless you have the leaders know what their purpose is. And so the work that we do, once they get that, you're going to work with a whole different space. Your company's coming from a very different place. There's something driving it. There's a machine that's driving it now that is fueled by deep caring as opposed to the money grab.
Yeah.
That's a very eloquent way of putting something that I kind of knew. I understood, but I just didn't understand the why. Maybe behind it.
Really.
Mm-hmm. And this is what we call the why of your why. So I love Simon Sinek's work around it starts with why, but this is the why of your why. So very often we'll manufacture a why, but this is the why of your why.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, it is. And it defines a lot of things, because I've done exactly what I've walked away from jobs before, turned down things. We have conversations with clients, like we'll say, what will be the outcome of people who fall for our tricks? And if I get a sense that people are going to get fired for falling for our work, then we don't work with that client, because that's not what I'm about. I'm not about coming in and destroying people's lives. So I've turned down jobs before because clients said, yeah, they have to be fired if they fall for this. And that is maybe the outcome of what you just said, but you helped define the why that was easy as a decision.
Yeah. And like my whole career path to this point was, I mean, there were threads that were common, and there were always things I could say, this is what I learned from this non sequitur that applies here. But oh gosh, I knew you were going to get me. I heard it coming out and I was like, put it back in, put it back in, put it back in. So in my career, there are parts of it that, I did Teach for America, which is not a permanent teaching job. It's just 2 years, but it's very different from my educational background and any jobs I've had. But Dov, you just explained the commonality between all of my career. Like, I feel like you just gave me so much clarity on how I got here.
Wonderful.
So thanks.
My absolute pleasure.
So I'm sure that many listeners will be sitting here thinking, okay, how do I get more? How do I learn more? So where can they go to learn about you and your work and your training and things like that?
Thanks for asking, Chris. I really appreciate that. The first thing is that I'm going to challenge everybody in this way that, listen, Chris and Kat put this podcast together, and Chris and I were talking about this before we recorded a few months back, and we were saying that we've both been doing podcasting for long before it was popular and cool. And there's a lot of time and energy that goes into that. So what I want you to do as a listener, as a viewer, as somebody who's taking this in, is please do me a favor and reach out to Chris and Kat and let them know what you got out of this. let them know that it was worth their time and energy. They find these amazing guests to have these conversations with to enlighten you, and you get that for free. But nothing is free. It puts their time and energy into it and their commitment to serving you. So please be sure to reach out to them and let them know the value you got and your gratitude for that.
Thank you.
If you want to reach out to me, you can tell me. I'd love to know what you got out of this and what you're going to do with it. And if I can assist you, if I can serve you, working with you to find your purpose, find your company's purpose, and work with your organization, you can write to me directly. It's very simple. Dov, at DovBaron.com. So Dov at DovBaron.com. But my website is fullmontyleadership.com. There you can find out about my books, my blog, my articles. There's over 400 articles on there. All my podcasts are on there. My podcast is Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. You can find out about that on there. You can find out about our TV show on Roku TV. You can find out about how we work with companies, about my speaking, about working one-on-one with me. And there's a ton of resources on there, as well as there is a YouTube channel with 400 videos on it, all great resources for you. And just reach out, just Google my name, Dov Baron, and I'm sure you'll find plenty. And I said, I look forward to welcome your conversation.
And you got to pick up the book, the Fiercely Loyal book. It's just such a great book that ties so many of the things that we talk about in this industry, but with a whole different spin on it that will tie a lot of these things together like we just did on this podcast.
I was literally going to say the same thing. It was a really enjoyable read.
Thank you very much, you both. I really appreciate that.
People love to read here and as our listeners. So we usually like to ask a question about, besides your books, which we will put in the show notes, do you have a book that you read and that you loved it for whatever reason? You just enjoyed it, or it changed your life, or something you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
Like your listeners, I'm a big reader. I love reading, and there are many books I could recommend, and many books in many different areas. But I'm going to recommend what I call my Bibles. What I mean by that are these are books that I read and have read for many years, multiple times a year. So the first one is Khalil Gibran's The Prophet. And that's not with an F, that's PH, The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. It's a very small book. It's short poems, and it really has guided my life. It's a beautiful book and beautiful, easy to read. Then I would recommend Illusions by Richard Bach, which is a short novella, easy to read. Both of those books I read when I was in my very early 20s, and they both changed my life path dramatically. So I would recommend both of those. And for me, they are leadership books, but from a place of personal leadership.
Khalil Gibran, I see that one. Okay, I'm marking these down so I can get them for the show notes. So that's quite an old book, isn't it?
Oh, they're both very old books. So Khalil Gibran's The Prophet is, 60 or 80 years old. And Illusions by Richard Bach is at least close to 40 years old. I read it when it was a new book, so I was, a baby when I read it.
Yes, I see. Excellent recommendations. These are great. I love it when we get recommendations on books that aren't directly in our industry because, as with this podcast, I love to pick out things that aren't in the security industry, look at them, listen to them, read them, and then figure out how we apply them into our mission or our goal and the things that we're doing on a daily basis. So these are two really great, fascinating
Can I just add something there, Chris, if that's okay?
Please.
I want you to think about the industry you're in. You're in security, and you invited me on because what I speak about is leadership. But let's put those two things together for a moment. What does security really mean? At its deep psychological level is what makes you feel safe. That's what you're trying to do here. You're trying to feel safe. Your greatest safety will come from self-leadership, by knowing yourself so that whatever comes at you, you know how to deal with it because you will fall back on the truth of who you are. The place that you can always land. You will get knocked down. Listen, I want you to know the world is going to knock you down. People are going to hit you to the canvas. And the question is, will you get up? And if you have purpose, you can get up because your purpose will give you the resilience. There is no way to not get hit. I'm sure that Chris and Kat have told you this a million times. There's no way not to get breached. If somebody decides to come after you, somebody's going to find a way to get you. That's all there is to it. The best you can do is take care of yourself. And one of the ways to do that in a psychological level is get to know yourself extremely well, get to know your own blind spots, get the assistance you need to discover what's at the depth of your being so that when they come at you, when they attack you, it's fine. You get up and you go, okay, sure, but here's who I am. Here's what really matters. Here's the truth of what I am. Here's why I get up and fight every day. Here's the hill I'm willing to die on. Here's what I deeply care about. Here's where my love is centered. So throw your bombs, bring your tanks. I'm centered in my heart, in my soul, and in my purpose. That is personal leadership, and that is the greatest security you'll ever have. And both of those books gave me catalyst. They catalyzed that journey inward for me, and I encourage it for you.
Yeah.
That's an awesome way to end that section. Thank you so much, Dov.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you both so much for having me.
It's been truly tremendous. I look forward to having you back on. I hope we can do this again.
Absolutely. It would be an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Oh, what an awesome podcast.
That was a lot of fun. He was an incredible guest and super mind-blowing revelations.
I loved that he backed up everything I've been saying about giant word usage.
Oh, hush. I only had 2, and I fixed them.
Oh, no, he just backed up what I've been saying for months. The podcast could have been a complete fail, which it wasn't. And if he just made that point, it would have still been the best podcast ever.
That's mean. I am not that bad. Only in emails. In emails do I really shine.
If by not that bad you mean horrible word usage of long words, then yes, I agree.
So do you want to play Scrabble when we were in training together? I feel like we'd be very evenly matched.
Oh man, so I loved how he we kind of got free consulting on that podcast.
Yeah, we did.
You know, like I feel like he helped define a lot of things about the company and the business, but also as an industry, I hope everyone who listened follow along with those exercises that he did. Even if that meant pausing it for a minute, pause the podcast, listen back, follow those exercises, and see what answers come up for you. Because I thought that was like having something active like that on a podcast that you can play along with right then and there. That was a little mind blowing for me.
Super tangible. I would put an asterisk on it and say that if you like to listen to us while you're driving, please do not close your eyes. But outside of that,
that's probably a good PSA right there.
Definitely follow along.
Yeah, follow along with eyes open.
Yes.
If you are driving. Unless you're driving in full autonomous mode, but even that may not be safe nowadays.
Who knows?
You know? Yeah, who knows? Well, anyhow, so if you want to follow us, Kat, what is your lovely Twitter account?
I am at Kat Murdoch. That's CATMURD0CK on Twitter.
For the hackerishness of it.
Yes.
Also, if you want to follow me, I am at Human Hacker on Twitter, and our corporate is SOC Engineer Inc. You can follow us on the websites at www.social-engineer.com for all of our corporate-y things, and www.social-engineer.org for the podcast newsletter and all of the free things. Take a look at the framework. Our dark horse, Karen, has been rewriting and reworking a lot of the older articles, and there's some really great content on the framework I'm really proud of. So you should take a look at that. And of course, if you have any questions or interest in our nonprofit, the ILF, you can find that on innocentlivesfoundation.org. I guess that is it. Until next time, see you.
On the 1st of November, and remember you were born a chosen